How do Joe Abercrombie's First Law books just keep getting better, right? Join me today as I talk about The Heroes, Book 5. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages. I'm Jim, the father of this father-son show. Thanks for joining me today as I bring a Spoiler-Lite book review to you on The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. This book came out first in October 2011. This is my second recent return to the First Law world, and you can find my episodes on the original trilogy a ways back in our playlists, but not very long ago I did Book 4, Best Served Cold. That book was fantastic, and I was like, why did I wait so long to get back to reading First Law books? It encouraged me to just keep on going, so it took me very little time to jump into The Heroes. I enjoyed this one even better. All the signs of grimdark fantasy are here, but there's some really deeper themes and life commentary blended in. It is not just your typical cheap grimdark fantasy. This stuff is solid. Not to mention, there are some wonderful characters, incredible action sequences, delightful plot twists, and a further advancement of the greater overarching story of First Law, all obviously on display for any reader. So, of course, the genre, we're talking grimdark fantasy. Very satisfyingly grimdark. Here's a spoiler-free plot summary, or spoiler-light. It's impossible to be free, but I mostly won't ruin this for you if you haven't read it yet. In this book, we return to the North, and we see the ongoing conflict between the Northmen, now ruled by Black Dow, as he overthrew Logan Ninefingers at the end of the original trilogy, and their fight against the forces of the Union, which include a contingent of the loyal Northmen, because Logan Ninefingers had a pact with the Union. When Black Dow overthrew him, he chucked that pact out, but some of the ones who were like, no, Logan knew what he was doing, they stayed faithful to that agreement Logan had made. They're led by the Dogman, who was one of my favorite characters back in the original trilogy, so I like that. This conflict has dragged on, however. This has been quite some time since that overthrow occurred, and there's really no end in sight. Both sides actually have been doing quite an intentional job of avoiding major battles, and of course, therefore, avoiding major losses. We're on the North's territory, and they know how to dance around the landscape and not get caught, just do little hit and runs. The Union would like to press the battle, but at the same time, they don't want to take very great risks, and there's partly a reason for it. Most of their leadership sucks. A lot of the best leaders of the Union died in the previous massive battle down in Adua. It's been a rough time for the Union. So the guys up here in the North, they're not all the sharpest tools in the shed, and they don't want to take risks. They want easy wins. As we enter this story, we've got two conflicting pressures now that are going to bring things to a head. One is Black Dow. He is the ruler partly because he's the meanest, baddest, most powerful guy around in the North. And the other main warriors of the North, they respect power. But as they see Black Dow just kind of skirmishing around and dancing around any major fights, they're going to start questioning things. And Black Dow knows his leadership is getting to be on a little bit of shaky ground. He needs to bring home a strong win. He needs to do something dominant and prove he should still be king. He is the one that's in charge, and that by following him, they will reap the rewards. So he's feeling that. It's time. It's time to do something serious about the Union. At the same time, the Union generals, who are still pretty content with things, have Baez show up. If you've read the previous books, you know who Baez is, the first of the Magi and the real power behind the Union. He shows up at the main headquarters of the Northern Army of the Union to stir the pot a little bit, making it clear it's time to advance this conflict to a concluding level. Not by next year, by next week. Let's go, let's do it. And he's quite serious. do whatever it takes. Get this conflict done, damn the cost. The leadership does not like that, but at the same time, he speaks for the king. They kind of got to do something. So they're going to go at the North hard at the same time that the North is coming at them hard. The results are huge. Both sides throwing themselves into this conflict. Devastating impact by the end of the book. The focal point of this key conflict is a geographic spot called the Heroes, which is an ancient structure reminding me a little bit of Stonehenge in the way it's described. It sits atop a steep hill, and it's all these ancient stone pillars. Nobody really knows how they got there in the first place. There's rumors and stories about what they stand for, and they're just known as the Heroes. Of course, the name of the book is The Heroes, so it's identifying this location, but it comes to have much greater meaning by the time you get done. It's not just about the monument. So, speaking of done, the end of the story, it leaves the Northmen significantly changed, while also shifting some of the power around for the Union forces. And the war? Well, there is a definite resolution, but you're going to need to read the book to get that. Spoiler light, baby. I can't spoon feed you everything. Now, the setting. The story entirely takes place in the North, all around this thing called the Heroes. The opening scene takes place at the Heroes, and that's a delicious scene. It's actually pretty fascinating how much Abercrombie can do with just this one location. How fantastic a story it is when nothing happens anywhere else. Time-wise, this occurs after the events of Best Served Cold, and that is really clearly laid out because of the character Cole Shivers, who was down in the continent of Styria, trying to make a new life for himself, turn over a new leaf in our last book, and, well, things didn't exactly go the way he hoped. He's in this book too, and it's clear this is after Best Served Cold. He is a changed man. He is the result of what we saw in that last book. Physically, mentally, emotionally. And it's fascinating to have him as another primary character in this book. How does he come in? He's on the side of the North. He's kind of a right-hand man of Black Dow, the guy who does the dirty jobs nobody else wants to do. And it's great to see him. It's also terrifying to see him if you're the one he's looking at. So I give the overall setting here and what Abercrombie does with the Heroes a 5 out of 5. As for the plot depth, there are so many things going on in this story at various different levels. There's political maneuvering amongst the people around Black Dow, and that's pressuring him, so even Black Dow is doing some of the maneuvering, and he's the king. There's the posturing and maneuvering amongst the Union Army leaders. They're supposed to all be working on the same side, but they are not, because they're in it for themselves at the same time. And of course, we've got the extra pressure that's been added by Baez, and it's not like he came in, put the pressure on, and left. He is an active player around what's going on, too. Both Baez and a representative of his opponent, Ishri, who we met in Best Served Cold, a magical person of the Gurkle Empire, is here. They're both players in this book, and they're on opposite sides, because really what's going on, this war between the Union and the Northern armies, is a proxy war between Baez and his opposite down south. And then there are so many other smaller stories of particular characters woven into this tale, interconnected in fascinating ways with many of the other characters and stories. Super complex, masterfully written, lots of depth here. 5 out of 5 rating. So let's speak about those characters. Abercrombie does characters really well, helping you relate to people and understand the motivations for why they act as they do and why they are who they are. He shows you that no one is just what you see on the surface. We get many memorable characters here and journeys of growth to enjoy. Some of my favorite characters include Prince Calder. Anyone who reads this, Prince Calder is probably one of their favorite characters. He's the second son of the former king of the North, Bethod, who was killed by Logan Ninefingers. Prince Calder is no warrior. He has a brother, Scale, who's a player in this book too. Scale's the warrior. He got all the fight from his father. But Prince Calder got all the brains, as sharp as a tack, and on a path to scheme his way into power. Or perhaps into an early grave. To be seen. Then there's Bremer Dan Gorst. Once a dueling phenomenon down in the Union, until he got the short straw against the future king of the Union, thanks to the manipulations of the first of the Magi. So Bremer Dan Gorst got the short end of the stick for sure. Now, turns out he landed well. He ended up being the head bodyguard for the new king. And he was in the last book, and I didn't even realize it. I'd have to go back and see. Was he named? He was part of the king's bodyguard at the whole carfuffle that happens in a brothel where the king almost dies. And Bremer Dan Gorst, well, things didn't go well for him there, and he gets removed from his responsibilities. And he's here in this as the observer for the king, but really it's kind of like exile. Dude, you're not good enough to be my bodyguard anymore. Get thee hence. But there's more to why he's here. His role in this book, it's fascinating, it's significant, and he's discovering it as he goes. It's really a lot of fun to actually get to see inside Bremer Dan Gorst's mind, his perspective on the world and his experiences, and he's just an incredible character, more than we ever realized before. Then there's Kerndon Craw, one of the leaders of men serving under Black Dow, and, as the book says again and again, a straight edge. He's an old school warrior of the North who is honest and true to his word. Something that if you're a reader of grimdark fantasy, you know doesn't often end well for a person. His story arc is unbelievable. And I really can't say enough about Finri den Brock, the young wife of one of the Union officers and also daughter of the marshal who's in command of the entire Union army. She is very driven. And in particular, she's driven to find a way to get her husband's star to rise, which is not as easy as you might think. She's very intelligent, very nuanced, good at playing politics from behind the scenes, but her husband is the son of a traitor. So not easy to get him to rise, and yet what she is willing to do in this book to achieve her goals is something awesome to observe. I could go on and on about the characters. I mean, just the humor and head shake earning behaviors that come out of many of these incompetent Union generals. You gotta be kidding me. And then there's the great story element brought in by the outsider warrior, leader of men from the North, stranger come knocking. Not someone who's under Black Dow's authority, a totally different segment of the North. What he adds to the story is wonderful and so interesting. There's just incredible storylines, character depth off the charts. Again, a definite 5 out of 5 rating. The writing style in this book, I mean, Abercrombie stays true to form in this grimdark fantasy novel, giving us what we expect for a First Law World book. And yet I felt his writing style stepped up a notch in this book. Or perhaps he just leaned further into what he was already doing well in other books and just refined it a little more. Like his character work. It's spectacular, even while he's advancing the greater First Law story through these events. Again, 5 out of 5. Themes, so many themes I could speak to because it's such a complex and deep book. The biggest ones that jump out might be the futility of war. It's senseless, chaotic, really often completely meaningless when you really boil it down. No one really wants to be fighting a war, and yet they seem unable to avoid it. And the results, despite how much they put into the war, the results are so often based on pure chance or miscommunication, a message that doesn't get through at the right time to make a difference, or the hidden agenda of people in charge and the people underneath them paying the price. And then there's a theme of moral ambiguity. Who is a good guy? That all depends on your point of view sometimes. And no one is squeaky clean. There is no one who's truly pure lily white. The genuine heroes are really the stories told afterward about people who are all polished up now to make a great story. Another theme would be the impact of leadership. That's really driven in this book. It highlights the massive impact that leadership has on those who follow, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. It also touches on the fallacy of leadership for the leader. It highlights the truism that the more power you have, the less freedom you actually have to act. People think, and when I'm in charge, I will do all these sorts of things. And once you're in charge, you find out you are so limited on what you can really do because so much is tied to whether you will stay in power. I'll give one more, the brutality of human nature. While we like to focus in our fantasy books on the strengths of humanity's character, this book shows how easily people slip into the most basic of drives: greed, cruelty, betrayal. People are pretty much willing to do whatever they need to do to advance themselves, and few are willing to truly sacrifice for the benefit of others. It's sad, but it's true. Those willing to make such sacrifices to put others before themselves, well, in these books, things usually don't end well for them. And the majority of people, they know that, so they decide they'd rather be scummy and alive than a dead hero. Warnings. Okay, it's Grimdark, people. I mentioned that, right? The story is packed with shockingly brutal violence, battle scenes filled with the typical results of battle when you've got axes and swords and crossbows going off everywhere, not to mention explosions. You have to read to know what that means. So if that kind of stuff really bothers you, this is not for you. You should not be reading Grimdark. And if you're not sure Grimdark is for you, well, then it probably isn't. But I'm not going to say you should never try a grimdark fantasy novel, but book 5 of First Law is not where to jump in. So by the time you get here, you should know you love grimdark, and there's really nothing in this then for a grimdark fantasy fan that I need to warn you about. If you like this stuff, this is magnificent. For a rating, my recommendation about this book, honestly, this is close to the perfect grimdark fantasy novel. You heard all my ratings before. 5 out of 5 out of 5 out of 5. This book delivers. It packs a punch on so many levels. If you at all enjoy gritty and grim fantasy fiction, this is an absolute must-read. 5 out of 5 for the whole book. All right, that's what I have for you. I really enjoyed the heroes. It's all that I've come to expect from Joe Abercrombie's writing and more. I hope you'll check it out. And if you do, let me know. Put your thoughts down in the comment box. If you've already read this book and you have anything that I said that you want to chime off on, I'd love to see your thoughts and I will respond. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.